I start my reminiscences at Grove End Farm, now Lazy Moon Farm, where I was born in 1917 and spent my first 4 years. Here in the garden, as it was, with Mother and Sister Margaret. Some of my happy memories of Brailes are of the 2 years during which I delivered milk in the village, as here, with Brother Hughie and red and white and blue decorations to celebrate the silver jubilee of George V. Firstly, let's look at some of the interesting places on the outskirts of the parish. This is Traitor'sford, where the Brailes parish boundary meets 3 other parish boundaries. No one can be sure where the name came from. It could have been the route of traitors to Gallows Hill, or probably a meeting place for traders. To the side of Traitor'sford is Ditch Hedge Lane, Beggar's Lane or High Street, with High Street Field on the left. A short way towards Brailes and on our right we see Lower Achel and one of the many fields of rape now in bloom. Mine Hill, now a private house, but originally a farmhouse. Before we come to the Sutton turn, see on our left a route much used in the past to Farnicombe and onto the Witchford Road. Just before you reach the Star was Brailes Mill. There are records of a mill here in 1086. From the Gallows Hill and Coombe Slade area crossed under the road here. It was then made into a banked water course to conserve a supply for the water wheel. In 1845 James Harris was the miller, probably the last, as the mill was demolished around 1886. An archway of greenery over Holloway Lane. The site of the brickyard, which was over 1 acre, on the Banbury Road, which closed about 1920. It was well known for a patent mousetrap made here. We are now at the point where the boundary from Traitor'sford, Ditch Hedge Lane, joins the Banbury Road. This field opposite, we have been told, was the site of the gallows, last used in 1834. An old name for the gallows was Government Signpost. Flowers in the hedgerow nearby. The site of the home of Theodore Lamb, just over the boundary on the Banbury Road. He was a well-known hermit who often visited Brailes. This is Theodore at home. And a temporary craze. He died on March the 23rd, 1950, at the age of 69. Castle Hill Lane, Spinney. The Grange and Springfield Farm. Below Springfield Farm is Durning's Barn, There was one and slated cottage here, with double barn, cart hovel, stabling for 6 horses, and a large yard. Upper Chelmsford. There was once a presbytery here. Lower Chelm and Drybank farms. A view from Brailes Hill looking towards Todden Willington, with Mr. Chandler's newly made lake in the foreground. View of high wall on top of Brailes Hill, a total of 72 beech trees. And young ones thoughtfully planted by Mr. Chandler to eventually replace them. A view of Brailes on our way down, looking towards Castle Hill Lane. From above Corley's Cover we see the church and Holloway Hill and the Brickyard Hill. Looking up Fanthill from the Shipston direction, there was a windmill at the top on the right which provided a private water supply for the manor. From the side of Fanthill we see Ashen Coppice and Ginny Swift Plantation. We now take a closer look at the village itself, coming into Upper Brailes from the Winderton direction, and on our right is the site of the old brickyard. The brickyard was in production until it was sold in 1928. Clay was dug for use here from the opposite side of the road. The manor. Six Bells Lane and Castle Hill. This house was once a public house known as the Six Bells. 2 items from the church warden's account of 1752 are of interest. Spent at the Six Bells paying ye bell fund, £1 2s, and spent at the Six Bells when we received the church rents, 4s. It is obvious that there have been alterations to the windows. Could this have been the site of an arm for a swinging sign? The council houses, the first 6 of which were built in 1932. Fanthill Farmhouse, which was prepared with beds and first aid equipment as a casualty station in the Second World War, but was never needed. A barn converted to 2 houses in 1983. The fountain, dated 1877, which supplied water to houses in this area. There was a blacksmith shop here until 1960. And just this side, another barn conversion. The end cottage on the left had cedar tiles put directly on top of its thatch in the early 1930s. Stockwell Spinney on the edge of Castle Hill. The site of Richard Hemmings's wheelwright shop. He also had a cider press, which was used here or travelled to other sites. Through this entrance on the left was a small sweet and general shop. In the 1880s it was a furniture shop run by Mrs. Burroughs. Opposite this entrance is a milestone which says Banbury 11, Shipston 3. Castle Hill once had tall trees on the top, which were cut down in 1928. The allotments, which belong to Brailes United Charities. Brailes Hill Farmhouse, now a private house. A picture taken of it in the 1920s, which is of interest because it shows a thatched barn on the right by the pavement. The thrashing of corn at the barn by High Wall was an annual event which entailed the transportation of thrashing drum and portable steam engine up the steep incline of 1 mile to the top of Brailes Hill. Here we see 2 teams of 5 horses, each with their loads to haul. But on the steepest parts they had to join forces to draw 1 load at a time. These pictures were taken in 1932. Here we see the threshing tackle leaving Brailes Hill Farm. Two horses with a single furrow plough getting the land ready for the next year's crop of corn on the top of Brailes Hill. This picture shows the immense difference in cultivation methods since it was taken in the early 1930s. A summer picture of the fountain. Note the tree by the fountain and the thatch on the end house. A similar scene in the winter. A picture taken in the early 1890s of Sophie Burroughs, daughter of the shopkeeper, and her husband Edwin Furniss, a saddler who came from Shipston in 1881 to work in Brailes. An interesting window in the apex of a house, but I can't find its history. The Gate Inn. And opposite the gate was an iron water trough. Local residents got their supplies from here. This house below the gate was once a sweet and general shop. Next door was a brewery from 1900 to 1920. It later became known as the band room and was used for dancing, and for a short while was the mission hall of the Plymouth Brethren. This was the home of the well-known Gillett family, who changed its occupation from sheep farming to wool trading, later to plush weaving, then to the manufacture of agricultural implements, and finally to banking. Gillett's Lane, which in my younger days was Leather Lane or Holly Walk. This barn opposite Gillett's Lane has planning permission for conversion. Widow's Row, now 3 dwellings, but once 5. George Brewer and Humphrey Webb had a blacksmith shop here, while Mrs. Webb ran the post office in the house from 1868 to about 1904. We are now on College Green. The post office was transferred to this house. The Methodist Chapel opened in 1863 to replace a nearby building which had been used since the 1840s. The Sunday School was added in 1881. Alwyn Claydon was a hurdle maker here. Methodist movement was first formed in Brailes in 1840. The land for the chapel was given by H.J. Sheldon, and the building cost £319. The cost of the Sunday school was £90, and a kitchen and toilets were added later in 1962 for £1,600. Mint Row development. The original row of cottages was also called Lollipop Row, as sweets were made here. This hill is known as Selcrax, which was the name of the sweet maker. A final look at College Green with the chestnut trees. We will now take a glimpse into the past, looking back at the gate and the brewery. A similar card, you can just see the hanging gate sign by the bedroom windows. Also, the board over the shop window just below the gate. The brewery with Stockwell Spinney in the background. A picture of Widow's Row, early this century. 4 front doors facing the road and 1 facing uphill. The blacksmith shop around 1930. Hurdle making on the green by the Methodist Chapel, in the days when all hens were free range. Harvest Festival in the chapel, showing the organ and the oil lamps. Another view of the blacksmiths, with the back of Ronan's Lee and Springfield House on the right. Sailcracks and the thatched cottages of Mint Row. My father, mowing with horses below Corley's cover. From Hall Meadow Farm, with his coach and horses and passengers, ready for a carnival at Honnington in 1937. Organisers of the Silver Jubilee celebrations at Upper Brailes, 1935. We'll now have a look at 4 more pictures of Theodore. A porcelain tap from the brewery, which has Taylor's patent imprinted on the back under the glaze. This metal disc has the words J. Gillett, manufacturer, Brailes, near Shipston-on-Stour, Warwickshire, on one side, and patent guillotine chaff engine 1850 with an impression of it on the other side. St. Ronan's Lee, the home of Dr. Finlay, who practised in the village from 1891 till his death in 1928. He was keen on photography and left a large collection of photographic slides and a closer view of the house. The entry to the surgery was through a door round this corner. The doctor's lodge at the end of the drive. And in the orchard just below, round about 1850, were 2 cottages and a forge. We moved to this farmhouse in 1921 in Henbrook Lane. The present owners are having a barn converted to a dwelling house. This house opposite was once 3 small cottages, which I remember being occupied by Bessie, Jessie, Lucy, Carrie and Polly and their lodger, Herbert. Just down the lane, this house was built with stone from the demolished Western house. And a bit further down, another house that was originally 2 smaller ones. Springfield House, which was the home of Sir Paul Harvey in 1914, when it was used as a hospital for wounded Belgian soldiers. Later it was used as a camp for German prisoners who were taken out in gangs to work on local farms. This is Springfield Lodge, which once had iron railings round its boundary. The village hall, which was built by Mr. Osborne of Stow-on-the-Wold at a cost of £7,600. It was opened on May the 31st, 1958. Springfield House, a picture taken between 1820 and 1860, when it was owned by the Winkett family, who can just be seen in front of the house. They were much involved with Winderton and Wychford. The lodge at the drive entrance that they had built for their gardener and caretaker, who are seen here. You can also see the railings round the garden. A helmet which was worn by one of the German prisoners from Springfield House during the First World War. Organisers of the flower show held in the field by the village hall, a picture of the late 1950s. This was once a wheelwright shop, and farm wagons were made here by Frank Bryan, who was a keen Methodist and held Band of Hope meetings at his home. Shipston doctors held a daily surgery here from 1949 for 20 years. Woodbine Cottage, once the home of some of the Clay family, well-known weavers in the village. This school for juniors was built in 1960 and enlarged in 1970. The bell, which was once above the old school in Sheep Street. Recent shops, the site of which was previously a small garden centre, and before that a garage for Matthews buses. Just below is a barn where older residents can remember the flailing of corn. This house was converted from the Wesleyan Chapel about 1960. In 1684 there was a Quaker meeting house here, which closed in 1854.